What if a president named warships after himself while claiming he'd personally designed them? That happened yesterday. And the reasoning reveals everything about ego versus national defense. Before we dive into this exercise in presidential narcissism, hit that like button and subscribe for analysis that doesn't sugarcoat political absurdity. December 22nd, Mar-a-Lago, Florida. President Trump stood before renderings of naval vessels bearing his own name, announcing the Trump-class battleship as part of his Golden Fleet vision. "I'm a very aesthetic person," Trump declared, explaining why he would help design the ships himself. But here's what makes this announcement more than just standard political theater. This isn't about naval strategy, it's about branding. And the cost to taxpayers could exceed $200 billion for ships that military experts say we don't need. The first ship will be called the USS Defiant. The logo, an image of Trump from his assassination attempt, fist raised, emblazoned on the side of a warship. Let that sink in. A sitting president turned his own near-death experience into military iconography. The announcement came with typical Trump hyperbole. These ships would be 100 times more powerful than any battleship ever built. They'd be the fastest, the biggest, and by far the most deadly. Missing from the presentation, any explanation of why we need battleships in 2025. The United States hasn't built a battleship since World War II. There's a reason for that. Modern naval warfare doesn't need massive, slow-moving targets loaded with conventional weapons. It needs aircraft carriers, submarines, and missile destroyers. But Trump has always been fascinated by the aesthetic of military power, rather than its practical application. During his first term, he complained about rusty ships and texted Navy Secretary John Phelan numerous times very late at night about ship appearances. This isn't strategy, it's vanity. The numbers tell the story. Each Trump-class battleship could cost over $10 billion to design, build, and deploy. Trump wants 20 to 25 of them eventually. That's a $250 billion ego project. For context, that's more than the entire annual budget of most federal departments. Naval analyst Brian Clark told reporters the ships would be impressive, but ultimately useless. These battleships will achieve none of the tactical goals required for modern warfare. But tactical effectiveness wasn't the point of Monday's presentation. Branding was. Trump stood next to Marco Rubio, Pete Hegseth, and Navy Secretary Phelan, all nodding along as he described ships that would carry his name into naval history. The optics were deliberate. This was Trump cementing his legacy in steel and nuclear weapons. The Golden Fleet concept itself reveals the thinking, not the American Fleet or the Freedom Fleet or any designation tied to national purpose. Golden, like Trump Tower, like his penthouse, like his toilet seats. Everything must bear the Trump brand, even instruments of national defense. The timing matters too. Trump made this announcement while facing multiple investigations, while his approval ratings show vulnerability, while questions mount about his mental fitness for office. What better way to project strength than literally putting your name on warships? But projection isn't strategy, and branding isn't military planning. The Pentagon's own assessments show different priorities. We need smaller, faster, more technologically advanced vessels, ships that can operate in the Pacific against Chinese naval expansion, platforms designed for modern threats, not World War II nostalgia. Trump's battleships, by contrast, would be massive targets designed for conflicts that no longer exist. They'd require enormous crews, consume vast resources, and provide capabilities we already have in more effective forms. Military experts have been politely critical. Retired Rear Admiral Mark Montgomery called the ships potentially decisive, but questioned their practical value. Others were less diplomatic. The real issue isn't naval architecture, it's priorities. Every dollar spent on Trump's vanity fleet is money not spent on actual defense needs. Cybersecurity, space capabilities, drone technology, artificial intelligence integration. These are the frontiers of modern military competition. But none of them offer the visual impact of a massive ship with Trump written on the side. The president's aesthetic obsessions extend beyond naming. He specifically mentioned that he would be involved in the design process, not military engineers or naval architects. Him. The U.S. Navy will lead the design, along with me, because I'm a very aesthetic person, he said. This is a president who thinks his taste in decor qualifies him to design military hardware. The same man who gold-plated his Manhattan penthouse now wants to impose his aesthetic vision on instruments of national defense. The constitutional implications are staggering. Military procurement is supposed to be based on strategic necessity, not presidential whim. Congress appropriates defense funds for national security, not personal branding. But Trump has consistently treated government resources as extensions of his private empire. Military parades became campaign events. Government properties became profit centers. Now warships become billboards. The pattern reveals itself across his entire presidency. The Space Force logo resembled Star Trek imagery he admired. Military ceremonies became political rallies. Even Air Force One became a branding opportunity, with Trump personally selecting color schemes. But battleships represent the ultimate prize. Unlike executive orders or policy announcements, these ships will outlast multiple presidencies. They're physical monuments to Trump's ego, floating for decades across the world's oceans. The Golden Fleet announcement also exposed Trump's fundamental misunderstanding of naval power. He referenced the Great White Fleet of Theodore Roosevelt, apparently missing the historical context entirely. Roosevelt's fleet was about demonstrating American emergence as a global power. It was diplomatic theater designed to announce our arrival on the world stage. Trump's Golden Fleet is about announcing his arrival in naval history. The purpose isn't strategic deterrence, it's personal legacy. The historical ignorance runs deeper than the misguided comparison. Modern naval doctrine prioritizes distributed lethality over concentrated firepower. The lesson of World War II wasn't that battleships were effective, it was that they became obsolete. Pearl Harbor proved aircraft carriers dominated naval warfare. The Bismarck's sinking showed even the mightiest battleships were vulnerable to coordinated attacks. Every major naval engagement since has reinforced these lessons. Yet Trump wants to resurrect a platform whose primary value is visual intimidation rather than tactical effectiveness. The international implications are equally problematic. These ships would be provocative symbols of American aggression rather than defensive capabilities. China and Russia would view Trump-branded battleships exactly as intended, as expressions of personal ego rather than rational military planning. That makes them less effective as deterrents and more likely to escalate tensions unnecessarily. Consider the message this sends to allies and adversaries alike. America's naval strategy is now driven by one man's branding obsessions rather than collective security needs. NATO partners, who contribute billions to joint defense efforts, see resources diverted to vanity projects rather than shared capabilities. China's naval expansion accelerates, while America builds monuments to presidential ego instead of addressing actual strategic challenges. The domestic political calculation is obvious. Trump wants ships bearing his name sailing the world's oceans long after he leaves office. He wants his brand permanently embedded in American military identity. It's the ultimate expression of his core belief that America exists to serve Trump rather than Trump serving America. The announcement's staging reinforced this message. Mar-a-Lago, his private resort, became the venue for announcing public military policy. His personal logo became military insignia. His aesthetic preferences became strategic priorities. Everything about the presentation communicated ownership rather than stewardship. The guest list for the announcement revealed the political calculation. Marco Rubio, positioning himself as Trump's heir apparent, stood nodding approval. Pete Hegseth, the defense secretary with questionable qualifications, provided military legitimacy. Navy Secretary Phelan, already known for accommodating Trump's aesthetic demands, offered bureaucratic cover. None challenged the fundamental premise. None asked why battleships in 2025. None questioned the wisdom of presidential ship naming. They understood their roles. Validate Trump's vision regardless of strategic merit. Naval tradition typically names ships after states, heroes, or battles with historical significance. The USS Arizona, the USS Enterprise, the USS Constitution. These names connect vessels to American values, sacrifices, and achievements larger than any individual leader. Trump is inserting himself into this tradition, claiming equal status with the defining moments and figures of American history. It's not just narcissism, it's historical revisionism in real time. The practical effects will outlast his presidency. If built, these ships will serve for decades, carrying Trump's name through multiple administrations and generations of sailors. Future presidents will inherit a fleet branded by their predecessor's ego rather than national purpose. Imagine foreign dignitaries boarding the USS Trump during diplomatic missions. Consider the message sent when these ships participate in international exercises or humanitarian operations. America's military becomes a rolling advertisement for one man's brand rather than a symbol of collective democratic values. The precedent extends beyond naval vessels. If presidents can name military assets after themselves, why not military bases, weapon systems, entire service branches? The Trump Space Force could become literal rather than metaphorical. Congress still has to appropriate the funds, defense contractors still have to bid on the projects, military leaders still have to implement the orders. But Trump's announcement creates political pressure for a program driven by vanity rather than necessity. Defense contractors, always eager for massive procurement contracts, will lobby heavily for these projects regardless of strategic value. The promise of quarter-trillion-dollar shipbuilding programs generates powerful constituency support. Military leaders trained to implement civilian directives will find ways to justify requirements they privately question. Congress, reluctant to appear weak on defense, will struggle to oppose projects framed as strengthening American naval power. That's how vanity projects become policy reality, through a combination of political pressure, economic incentives, and institutional inertia that overwhelms strategic common sense. The opportunity costs are staggering. Every dollar spent on Trump's battleships is money not invested in capabilities America actually needs. Cybersecurity infrastructure, hypersonic missile defense, artificial intelligence integration, space-based surveillance systems. These represent the actual frontiers of military competition. China invests heavily in all of them, while America builds floating monuments to presidential ego. The irony is profound. Trump claims these ships will project American strength while actually revealing American weakness. Our inability to separate rational planning from personal politics. That's the real danger here, not the ships themselves, rules, but the precedent they establish. The idea that military assets exist to serve presidential brands rather than national interests. If this goes forward, it won't be the last time politics trumps strategy and defense planning. It will be the first of many. Future presidents will see Trump's success at personal military branding and demand their own legacy projects. Defense planning will become exercise in ego management rather than strategic thinking. The constitutional framers never imagined presidents would treat military assets as personal property. They assumed leaders would subordinate personal interests to national ones. Trump's Battleship announcement reveals how naive that assumption was. Sometimes the most important battles aren't fought on distant shores, but in Washington conference rooms where egos clash with expertise. The Trump-class battleship represents ego winning that battle, and America's national security paying the price. If this analysis opened your eyes to how personal ambition can hijack national policy, make sure you're subscribed and hit that notification bell, because understanding the difference between leadership and self-promotion matters more than presidential branding. See you in the next one.